They called him David Hayes, a simple farmer. But the night a dozen rifles pointed at our door, I learned his real name was Ghost, and he was calling in Delta Force. The first thing you learn on a farm is that the earth has its own rhythm. It has a smell before the rain, a particular silence in the dead of winter, and a hum of life in the high summer. My father taught me that. He taught me how to read the land, how to feel the turn of the seasons in my bones. He was a man made of that same earth, I thought. Solid, quiet, and unyielding. His hands were a roadmap of calloused hard work, and his face was tanned and lined from a life under the sun. To me, and to everyone in our small corner of Georgia, David Hayes was just a farmer. A damn good one, but just a farmer. Our family has worked this land for 3 generations. We were one of the few black families in the county who owned their spread free and clear. 100 acres of pecan groves, a sprawling vegetable operation, and a reputation for the sweetest peaches this side of the Mississippi. It was a good life, a hard life, but a good one, and my parents, David and Sarah, were the bedrock of it all. Mom handled the books and the farm stand with a smile that could charm a snake, and Dad, well, Dad was the quiet force that made everything grow. The trouble started subtly, the way a sickness does. It began with a new sheriff, a man named Miller. He was all sharp angles and a smile that never quite reached his eyes. He'd cruise by our property, his patrol car kicking up a slow cloud of dust, his mirrored sunglasses fixed on our house. The first time, Mom just waved. The 5th time, she stopped. "David," she said, her voice tight, "that man is starting to get on my nerves." My father didn't even look up from the tractor engine he was fixing. "Let him look, Sarah. We've got nothing to hide." But Miller's looking turned into stopping. He'd pull over my dad on the way back from the supply depot, asking to see his license and registration, asking what was under the tarp in the truck bed. "Just fertilizer, Sheriff," my dad would say, his voice a low, calm rumble. He never got angry. He never raised his voice. He was patient, methodical. He treated Sheriff Miller like he treated a stubborn bolt-apply steady pressure. Don't strip the threads. It escalated. One afternoon, Miller and 2 deputies pulled right up to our front porch. I was on the steps, shelling peas, and I saw the way their hands hovered near their hips. My mom came out, wiping her hands on her apron, her smile gone. "Afternoon, Sheriff. Something we can help you with?" she asked. "Ma'am," Miller drawled, tipping his hat, but keeping that cold look. "We've had a few anonymous tips about this property." My dad emerged from the barn, his shadow falling long in the afternoon sun. He moved with a quiet economy of motion that always made him seem bigger than he was. He stopped beside my mom, a solid wall of a man. "Tips about what, Sheriff?" "Unusual activity, a lot of late-night deliveries, expensive new equipment showing up." Miller gestured vaguely at our new John Deere harvester. "Folks are just wondering how a simple farming family affords a machine like that. Wondering if you're growing something other than peaches." My father's jaw tightened, just a fraction. It was the only sign of his anger. "We afford it through a business loan and 3 generations of breaking our backs on this soil. You're welcome to see the paperwork. You are not, however, welcome to search my property without a warrant." Miller's smirk was ugly. "Playing lawyer now, are we, David? Don't you worry. We'll get our warrant. We'll find whatever it is you're hiding out here." They left, and a heavy silence settled over the farm. That night at dinner, my mom was quiet, pushing food around her plate. "David, this is getting out of hand," she finally whispered. "They're targeting us. You know why." We all knew why. My father put down his fork and looked at her, his eyes deep and serious. "Sarah, I will not let any man run us off our own land. This is our home. I will handle it." "How?" she asked, her voice cracking. "He's the law. What can you possibly do?" My dad just looked at her, and for a second I saw a flicker of something in his eyes I'd never seen before. Not farmer, not husband, not father. It was something harder. Something ancient and dangerous. "I will handle it," he repeated, and the tone of his voice ended the conversation. 2 nights later, it happened. We were finishing up dinner when the dog started barking, a frantic, high-pitched sound. I went to the window and my heart dropped into my stomach. a convoy of patrol cars was storming up our long gravel driveway. No sirens, just the silent, menacing flash of red and blue lights. They painted the pecan trees in demonic colors. Doors flew open, and a dozen officers in tactical gear, carrying rifles, began to form a perimeter around our house. A spotlight from one of the cars hit our front porch, blindingly bright. "David Hayes," a voice boomed through a megaphone, "undoubtedly Miller's. We have a warrant to search this property. Come out with your hands in the air." My mother gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. My blood ran cold. I looked at my dad, expecting to see fear, or panic, or rage. I saw none of it. His face was a mask of absolute chilling calm. He stood up not with the weary weight of a farmer, but with the fluid grace of a predator. "Sarah," he said, his voice low and devoid of any emotion. "Take Marcus to the storm cellar, the one in the pantry. Lock it from the inside. Do not come out until I come and get you myself. Do you understand?" "David, no," she cried, grabbing his arm. "Don't go out there." He gently removed her hand. He looked at me, and his eyes weren't my father's eyes anymore. They were the eyes of a stranger. "Go with your mother, son. Now." His voice was a command, not a request. It was the kind of voice that you obey without question. As my mom pulled me, stumbling, towards the pantry, I looked back over my shoulder. My dad wasn't reaching for the old shotgun he kept by the door. He wasn't looking for a weapon at all. Instead, he pulled a small, rugged-looking satellite phone from a hidden compartment in the kitchen counter. With the tactical team setting up outside my home, with my mother sobbing, with a dozen rifles pointed at our front door, my father calmly dialed a number. I heard him speak just 6 words before the cellar door slammed shut. Words that made no sense. Words that would change everything. "This is Ghost," he said, his voice like ice. "I have a broken arrow." The heavy cellar door thudded shut, plunging us into a darkness that smelled of damp earth and my mother's canned peaches. The silence was absolute for a moment, and then the muffled chaos from outside bled through the thick wood. My mother was shaking, her hand clasped over her mouth, her quiet sobs the only sound in our small, dark world. "Broken arrow," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Oh, David, what does that mean?" I had no answers. The words were alien, a code from a life I couldn't imagine my father ever living. Ghost. It didn't fit the man with dirt under his fingernails and pecan dust in his hair. Outside, Sheriff Miller's voice boomed through the megaphone again, tinny and distorted. "Last chance, Hayes. Come out or we're coming in." I braced myself for the splintering crash of our front door being kicked in, for the sound of gunfire. My mother pulled me closer, her arms a tight band around my chest. But the crash never came. Instead, a new sound began, a distant rhythmic thumping that grew steadily louder, vibrating up through the packed earth floor of the cellar. Whoomp, 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 whoomp. It wasn't the light chatter of a news chopper or the county's single aging Bell helicopter. This was a deep, guttural roar, the sound of immense power. It grew until it was a physical presence, a deafening beat that seemed to shake the jars on the shelves around us. It sounded like it was landing right on top of our house. The muffled shouting outside changed. Miller's confident commands turned into confused, angry questions. Then, other voices cut through the noise. They were different, calm, clipped, and utterly authoritative. "On your knees. Drop your weapons. Hands on your head. Now." The commands were sharp, professional, and they weren't directed at my father. The sounds of boots on gravel, the clatter of rifles being dropped, the sharp, rasping sound of zip ties being pulled tight. It was a symphony of swift, brutal efficiency. Then an eerie silence fell, broken only by the low hum of engines and the occasional crackle of a radio. The wait was agonizing. Every second stretched into an eternity. My mom's prayers were a constant, soft murmur beside me. I strained my ears, trying to picture what was happening in our yard. Who had come? Who had my father called? Finally, after what felt like a lifetime, we heard footsteps on the kitchen floor above us, followed by a sharp, precise knock on the cellar door. "Sarah, Marcus, it's me. It's over." It was Dad's voice, but it was stripped bare. All the gentle, rumbling warmth was gone. It was flat, controlled, the voice of a man giving a report. My mom scrambled to the door, her hands fumbling with the heavy iron latch. The door swung open, and he stood there, silhouetted by the kitchen light. He was physically the same man, but his entire presence had shifted. He stood taller, his shoulders squared, his gaze sweeping the cellar in a quick, practiced scan before settling on us. The weary slump of the farmer was gone. This man was a weapon. "Are you all right?" he asked, his eyes checking us for injuries. We both nodded, speechless. He helped my mom up the steps, his hand firm on her arm. The kitchen was just as we'd left it, plates still on the table. But the moment we stepped onto the front porch, the world had been turned upside down. It was no longer our farm. It was a military staging area. 2 sleek black helicopters, devoid of any markings, sat in the field where we grew our sweetest corn. Their rotors drooped in the sudden silence. Men dressed in black tactical gear moved with a silent, synchronized purpose, securing the perimeter. They weren't police. They weren't FBI. They were something else entirely, their faces grim and anonymous behind their equipment. And there, in the middle of our gravel driveway, knelt Sheriff Miller and his entire team. They were on their knees in a neat line, hands cuffed behind their backs. The floodlights from their own patrol cars now illuminated their shocked and furious faces. Miller was seething, his face a blotchy red. "You can't do this," he screamed at a man in a crisp, dark suit who was observing the scene. "This is my jurisdiction. I'm the law here." The man in the suit ignored him completely. His attention was fixed on my father as we stepped off the porch. He approached, giving my dad a short, respectful nod. "Ghost, glad we got here in time. We received the signal loud and clear." "Director," my dad replied, his voice still holding that unnerving calm. "Thanks for the quick response." The director finally acknowledged the kneeling sheriff. He walked over and crouched down, his movements fluid and precise. Miller glared at him. "Who the hell are you people? You think you can just swoop in here with your black helicopters and your goon squad?" The director allowed a thin, cold smile to cross his lips. "Sheriff, you seem to be operating under a series of catastrophic misunderstandings. The first is that you are in charge. The second," he said, his voice dropping, "is that this is a simple police matter." He leaned in closer, his voice a conspiratorial whisper that carried in the night air. "A broken arrow alert is not a call for backup. It's a protocol that triggers when a Tier 1 national security asset is compromised by a hostile entity." Miller's face went from furious to confused. "Asset? What asset? There's nothing out here but dirt and peaches." The director stood up slowly, brushing a non-existent piece of dust from his trousers. He gestured with his chin towards my father, who stood watching them, a silent, unmovable guardian of his home. "That man is the asset, Sheriff. You didn't just serve a warrant on a farmer. You and your deputies knowingly and willingly threatened the life of a senior field commander within the Joint Special Operations Command." The director looked down at the kneeling lawman, his smile gone, replaced by a look of pure, clinical ice. "You picked a fight with the wrong farmer. Tonight you put your hands on the man they call Ghost. He's the commander of the 1st Special Forces Operational Detachment, Delta." He paused, letting the name hang in the air like a death sentence. "And right now, every single person in this government, right up to the president himself, is wondering why you decided to declare war on Delta Force." The words hung in the air, heavy and impossible. Delta Force. The name was something from movies, from whispered legends about the baddest men on the planet. And Sheriff Miller's face, illuminated in the cold glare of the floodlights, seemed to crumble. The blustering rage drained away, replaced by a pasty, slack-jawed terror. The color left his face so fast he looked like a ghost. He wasn't looking at the director anymore. He was staring at my father, at the quiet farmer who pruned his peach trees with meticulous care. And for the first time, he was seeing the man who stood there. I looked at him too. Really looked at him. The calloused hands I knew so well. They hadn't just held wrenches and steering wheels. They'd held weapons I couldn't even name. The quiet patience he had with a stubborn engine was the same patience he'd shown Miller. The calm before a perfectly executed, devastating action. The way he could read the land, the sky, the seasons. It wasn't just farming. It was a heightened state of awareness, an instinct honed in places I couldn't begin to imagine. My entire life, my entire perception of my father was a carefully constructed lie. And yet as I looked at him standing there, protecting us, it was the truest thing in the world. My mother made a small sound, a half-sob, half-laugh, of disbelief. She clutched my father's arm, not in fear, but as if to anchor herself. "David," she whispered. He turned his head slightly, and his eyes, for the first time that night, softened as they met hers. The soldier receded, and the husband returned. "It's all right, Sarah. It's all over." The director cleared his throat, bringing the focus back to the business at hand. He gestured to one of his men, who stepped forward with a file. "Sheriff Miller," the director said, his voice flat and final. "Under the authority of the National Security Act, you and your deputies are being detained pending an investigation by the Department of Justice. Your anonymous tips trace back to a land developer who has been trying to force Mr. Hayes to sell for years, a developer who also happens to be your brother-in-law. You weren't just harassing a family, you were using the color of law to run a racketeering operation. And your target," he paused, letting the weight of it sink in, "was a Tier 1 national asset on sanctioned downtime. You have no idea the storm you've brought down upon yourselves." Miller didn't even protest. He just knelt in the gravel, a broken man, as the federal team efficiently took charge, leading him and his disgraced deputies away. The black helicopters lifted off with a deafening roar, their lights disappearing into the starry Georgia sky. The director's men worked with quiet professionalism, collecting the local police weapons, taking statements, and then, as quickly as they had arrived, they began to melt away, leaving us in the sudden, ringing silence of our own farm. The director approached my father one last time. The official story will be a multi-agency training exercise that got its wires crossed with a local warrant. It'll be messy, but it will be buried. Your cover is intact, Ghost. My father shook his head. My name is David Hayes, and I'm a farmer. The director gave a small, rare smile. Of course you are. We'll be in touch. He gave a nod to my mother and me, then turned and disappeared into the shadows, his car pulling away without a sound. We were alone. The three of us stood on the porch, the air smelling of ozone and disturbed earth. The blinking lights of the abandoned patrol cars were the only evidence of the invasion. I finally found my voice. "Why?" I asked him, the single word holding 1,000 questions. "Why didn't you tell us?" He sighed, a long, weary sound, and the weight of the farmer returned to his shoulders. He sat down on the porch steps, the same steps I used to sit on shelling peas, and looked out at his pecan groves. "Because this is real," he said, his voice a low rumble. "The soil, the seasons, your mother's smile, watching you grow, that other life. It's a necessary thing, a dark thing, but it's not real. Not like this." He looked at my mother. "I never wanted to bring that shadow into our home. This farm, this was my sanctuary. It's where I came to wash the world off, to just be David." My mother sat down next to him, taking his large, calloused hand in hers. She was no longer crying. Her eyes were clear, filled with a deep, unwavering understanding that I was only just beginning to grasp. "I always knew," she said softly. "I didn't know what it was. I never asked. But I knew there was a part of you that you kept locked away. I knew that the quiet man who loved this land could also handle anything or anyone that threatened it." She squeezed his hand. "I married all of you, David Hayes, the farmer and the ghost." He looked down at their joined hands, and I saw a single tear trace a path through the dust on his cheek. He looked up at me, his son. "I just wanted you to have a normal life, Marcus. To worry about homework and tractors, not the other stuff." I walked over and sat on his other side. The three of us, a strange trinity, on a porch surrounded by flashing blue and red lights. I looked out at the fields, the same fields I had looked at my whole life. They looked different now. They weren't just a farm. They were a fortress, a sanctuary built and guarded by the quietest, most dangerous man I had ever known. He reached out and put his arm around my shoulders, pulling me close, It was the same familiar, comforting embrace he'd given me 1,000 times. But now I understood the steel beneath the warmth. I understood that my father, David Hayes, was a man who grew life from the earth with one hand and defended it from the darkness with the other. The sun was beginning to rise, painting the eastern sky in shades of peach and rose. A new day was dawning on our farm, and for the first time I truly understood the rhythm of our land and the unyielding strength of the man who was its heart.